Good morning, everybody, and Presidents, Prime Ministers, Secretary-General Guterres, I'm delighted to welcome you all to London as we come together today to support President Farmajo in building a more secure, stable and prosperous future for all the people of Somalia. As an international community, our commitment to Somalia matters. Not just because it is right to help Somalia to overcome the threat of terrorism and the devastating effects of years of famine and bloodshed, but also because these challenges that face Somalia affect us all. If Somalia is a foothold for terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab and Daesh, if global trade is hijacked by pirates in the Indian Ocean, or if millions are continually displaced in a desperate bid to escape poverty and drought, the impact of instability in Somalia is felt across the whole region and the wider world. But what we have seen over the last 5 years is that when we work together on these issues, we can make progress. That progress has required exceptionally hard work and great sacrifice, not least from the troop contributing countries to the AMISOM mission, from Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Burundi and Djibouti, from Somalia themselves, and from a broad coalition of other partners, including Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, the EU, America and the United Nations. But because of these efforts, Al-Shabaab has been pushed back, piracy largely contained, and new momentum brought to the political process. And I'm proud of the role that Britain has played in this work. As a global Britain, we will continue to drive coordinated international efforts that increase global security and protect our values around the world. And as we are demonstrating with our third London conference, Britain's commitment to Somalia's future remains steadfast. As we meet today, Somalia has a critical window of opportunity. The election of President Farmajo and his mandate for reform provides a unique chance for Somalia to take control of its security and to build an inclusive political settlement with new economic development that can help to create more jobs and livelihoods for its people. So our task today is not to tell Somalia what to do, nor to impose our own solutions on this country from afar, but rather to get behind the new president's efforts and to support the Somali people as they work to build this new future for their country. President Farmajo, you have already shown great leadership in forging an historic agreement between the federal government and the federal member states over the future of Somalia's army and police. You have a mandate to shape a new future for your country, and we are here today first and foremost to support your efforts. So I'm delighted to invite you to make your opening address.
Good morning, Your Excellency, the Right Honourable Theresa May, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary-General of the United Nations, His Excellency Moussa Faki Mohammed, Chairman of the African Union Commission, heads of states and governments in attendance, representatives of nations and organizations. It's indeed a great honor to be addressing you all today at this special conference on Somalia's future in this beautiful city of London. I'm delighted to be sharing this historic day with our key partners, all of whom have stood by our people and nation in our greatest period of need. I would like to take this opportunity to especially thank our great host, Prime Minister Theresa May, and her government for commitment and bringing this conference to fruition. As many of you know, this is not the first conference for Somalia hosted by the UK. For that, we thank you, Prime Minister. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as you are all aware, Somalia successfully concluded a long and complicated election process on the 8th February 2017. On that day, representatives of Somali people voted for change and a new direction for our country. I was humbled by the enormous public support I received following the election. I am, however, very aware of the high expectations the Somali people have for me, starting with improved security and provision of basic services such as health and education. Although we are working tirelessly to meet everyone's expectations, in the meantime, we hope to gradually improve our citizens' lives. The successful and peaceful transfer of power following my election was a reminder of Somalia's potential as a beacon of democracy and hope in one of the most unstable regions in the world. In fact, Somalia has a long and proud tradition of democracy going back to independence in 1960. We were the first country in Africa wherein a sitting president transferred power peacefully after losing national election. Despite the enormous challenges my country faces, we strive to those ideals. We believe that the only path to fully recovering Somalia is strengthening our democratic institutions. To that end, I will spare no effort to realizing the promise of my campaign, which was to fight Somalia's three major enemies: terrorism, corruption, and poverty. My vision revolves around these three issues, and the way to address them starts with building vital state institutions with a focus on security apparatuses and championing on an overall reform agenda. Most importantly, I will take measurable steps to unleash the great potential of my people to develop their own country and to do what they know best: trade and commerce. I strongly believe that trade is the surest way to reduce poverty and generate mass employment. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, my reform agenda started with selecting capable and proven leader as a Prime Minister. Prime Minister Hassan Ali Khaire brings a decade of experience as a senior executive in the humanitarian and development sector, and later as a successful businessman. Capitalizing on this experience and network, and following extensive consultation with all actors, the Prime Minister formed a technocratic cabinet that includes 6 female ministers, the largest in our history, and many young ministers representing 85% of our population who are under the age of 40 years old. One of the new young ministers was former refugee camp in Daawo, the world's largest refugee camp in Kenya. His compelling story gives insight into the transformation my country is going through. Unfortunately, his life was cut short last week, but his legacy remains with us. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I recognize that a good cabinet is only as good as the service it delivers to its people. And in Somalia, delivering anything hinges largely on getting politics right. Good politics must be inclusive, participatory, vibrant, and on a leveling playing field. In this regard, we are committed to solidifying our federal system of governance, which has been in place only since 2004. Our overall vision is to achieve a strong and cooperative union which works for all Somalis and enhance equity and good governance. We are thankful a step closer to this objective, as illustrated by the recent historic formation of a new National Security Council, which includes federal member states. The National Security Council is not only a platform for dialogue on security issues, but on broader matter of national importance. The fact that all heads of federal member states are with me here today speaks volumes of our collective effort towards a strong and cooperative union. Together with other stakeholders, we will be engaging in in-depth discussion around matters of national importance. We are already engaged in a deep dialogue on sharing of natural resources. This is and other areas will be discussed in the context of constitutional review process. As the leaders of Somalia, we recognize that the Constitution is the document that binds us together. However, our political effort will not stop there. In the coming months, we will complete legislation around political parties so that all Member of Parliaments and other interested groups can form their political parties legally. We are determined to encourage a vibrant political environment which upholds the best practices of democracy, freedom of assembly, and freedom of speech, of which are enshrined in our Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, security remains paramount of my administration. The new national security architecture and the Security Pact give us the tool we need to strengthen our Somali National Army and introduce an improved policing model. Together with the African mission in Somalia, I am confident that we can defeat al-Shabaab in the next few years. Once we recover the remaining territories and secure supply routes, we will stabilize the country by building local administrations in collaboration with the federal member states. We believe that communities are best placed to collaborate with local, state, and federal government to stabilize the country. But the government needs the necessary tools to be able to defeat al-Shabaab. For far too long, our security forces and terrorist groups have been fighting using the same type of light weapons, mostly AK-47. Despite the bravery of our men and women in uniform, we were locked in symmetrical battle with the terrorists. Without AMISOM forces who are supplied with heavy weapons, we would not have been able to defeat al-Shabaab. The long-standing arms embargo on Somalia severely restricted our ability to procure heavy weapons despite the partial lifting of the embargo in 2013. Time has come for Somalia to be able to get access to qualitatively better equipment and weapons than terrorism. In this regard, we are working with our partner and the Security Council to develop a clearly defined roadmap to full lifting of the arms embargo. This would include the improvement we must make to our weapon management, command and control system. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to this security sector support we receive from our friends, we are grateful to all partners for their unwavering and sustained support over the years. Many provide financial support, while others provide technical and logistical support. One partner I would like to dedicate special gratitude is AMISOM. Their peacekeepers have been working with us for 10 years, much longer anyone expected. During that time, they have sacrificed many soldiers in the quest to help Somalis defeat al-Shabaab and rebuild our security forces. Their sacrifices will not go in vain. A vital element of rebuilding our security apparatus is to radically improve on coordination among international partners on the security front. I will welcome the genuine attempt to address these fundamental problems through the creation of Comprehensive Assistance to Security, or CAS group. This group, in close collaboration with the Somali National Security Office, must end duplicity and fragmentation in the security support sector. On our side, the National Security Council is designed to do the same. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, the insecurity situation cannot be changed without addressing its root causes, which is abject poverty and mass unemployment. Too many of our young generation are sitting idle, creating fertile ground for terrorists to recruit from. We must tackle this issue with a robust economic recovery plan. To this end, we have identified the priority of the priorities within the National Development Plan, the NDP, which clearly articulates our development agenda, is based on sound evidence and extensive consultations across the country. Our partner should align their support with the priority of National Development Plan, which are focusing on strategic investment in key sectors such as productive sector of agriculture, livestock, and fishing. Moreover, major investment would have to be made in vital infrastructure, starting with renewable energy, clean water, and road construction. That's the only way to create mass employment. But all that investment needs substantial resources, and our meager revenue can barely cover our budget. Access to international financial institutions is restricted due to the existing arrears. In this regard, I'm delighted that we have now developed a well-defined, milestone-based roadmap to arrears clearance and normalization of relationship with international financial institutions. I commend the work of the World Bank and IMF, together with our finance minister, on this crucial work. This is an area that I will personally follow to ensure that we are meeting our obligations. Many countries and organizations have demonstrated willingness to cancel their loan. Here I recognize the League of Arab States, who announced that member states are prepared to forgive their loan during their summit in Amman in March. We are grateful to our Arab brothers and sisters for this. When it comes to the economic development, the greatest asset we have is the entrepreneurial spirit of our people. My administration will take measurable steps to unlock their potential by removing barriers to doing business in Somalia and promoting small and medium enterprises. One major barrier is the inability of our financial institutions to access their international counterparts. The money transfer businesses, who send a combined amount of about $2 billion a year to Somalia, are struggling to access banks here in the UK and in the United States due to the severe restriction placed on them. This despite the fact that we made tangible progress over the past few years. Time has come to facilitate access for our financial institutions to work with your banks. A continuation of current policy which undoubtedly deprive crucial access for our banks, and as a consequence will limit employment opportunity in the financial sector. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, for too long, the conventional wisdom has been that Somalia was a problem to fix, and the people perfect humanitarian example due to the failure of state to do its job. Today, my administration is committed to seizing this golden opportunity to nurture and deliver on a better, stronger, and more prosperous Somalia, led by the hopes and aspirations of its people. This is the best way to continue the process of changing the prevailing narrative. Despite the extraordinary challenges that my people face, we must remember that they withstood both natural and man-made calamities, and with their classic resilience, started some of the most successful telecom and remittance companies in Africa. Together with our partners, my administration aims to capitalize on this God-given talent for a better Somalia, one that can secure itself, manage its politics, and revive its economy. The new Partnership for Somalia provides an excellent framework for cooperation and coordination. The NPS puts government leadership at the heart of implementation of programs and projects. It allows to hold each other accountable which I wholeheartedly welcome. If my administration fails, we hope you hold us to account. We promise to do the same. Only in that spirit, we can lift Somalia to a new heights. In conclusion, there have been many conferences in the past on Somalia and for Somalia. Today's events are different because I can assure and reassure you that Somalis will never turn back to its difficult past. It will only go forward toward progress and prosperity, as is the will of its people and the priority of its government. In engaging with us on the vast array of issues for discussions ahead during this conference, please be confident of the sincerity of this promise. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, President Farmajo, for setting out such a compelling vision for the future of your country. And your leadership and your commitment to the reforms that you've described will be crucial in building the security, stability and prosperity that you seek and that we all want to see. Now, in return, I hope that today you will see a renewed international commitment to support you in this mission, and there's no greater sign of this international support than the ongoing commitment of the United Nations. This is my first opportunity to share a platform with Secretary-General Guterres, and I'm delighted it is here at this conference in Somalia, and welcome. And the fact, Secretary-General, that you've chosen to attend in person today, I think shows the significance of the United Nations commitment to continue prioritising Somalia. And as I say, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome you here to London and invite you to address the conference.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to support Somalia at a moment which is both tragic and hopeful. And I do believe that Somalia can be, in the near future, the kind of good news that we badly need in the international community and in our troubled world. And I thank the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Theresa May, as well as President Farmajo of Somalia for co-hosting. And I deeply appreciate the leadership of the African Union and the vital role of AMISOM. And I thank Chairperson Faki for joining us today. I commend the President, along with Prime Minister Kaire and the new Cabinet and leaders of the federal member states, for their political will to work together in Somalia. Like all of us, I was deeply saddened by the tragic death of last week of the Minister of Public Works, Abbas Siraji. He grew up in a refugee camp and went on to become a powerful symbol of Somali's hopes for the future. His unfortunate death must not diminish our resolve to see these hopes realized. On the contrary, his sacrifice must encourage all Somalis to maintain the spirit of inclusiveness, embracing women, youth, minorities, business leaders, and all members of the society, and must encourage us all to support that effort. The significantly enhanced representation of women and youth in the new federal parliament shows Somalia's positive trajectory. And we are here to listen to Somalia's leadership and to agree on a framework for cooperation. This unique chance to build on progress comes thanks to the courageous and selfless service of the men and women of AMISOM. I want to pay tribute to them. But I also want to say that I visited Somalia several times. I was in Mogadishu several times, escorted by AMISOM. And I have seen the precarious conditions in which AMISOM soldiers were not only protecting the Somali people, but they were protecting our global security. I remember Mogadishu, when Shabab controlled Alpha Mogadishu. AMISOM had no helicopters, no night vision systems, and armored cars that could be penetrated by the weapons of Shabab. And AMISOM soldiers, women and men, were fighting, and AMISOM police were fighting to protect our global security. And they were doing so under a Security Council mandate and without enough support and unpredictable funding. I think this is the moment to seriously look into the predictable way to fund AMISOM. I myself am favorable to the consideration of the possible assessed contributions in relation to at least part of AMISOM's effort. I know the African Union is working on partially funding its own operations. But this is something that we need to solve to give AMISOM the capacity to really create the conditions that allow the federal government and the new security institutions of Somalia to then be able to assume the responsibility of the security of their own country. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, more than 6 million people in Somalia need assistance, or nearly half of the population. Some 275,000 malnourished children are at risk of starvation. I went to Somalia in March, and on my first visit to the field as Secretary General, and I saw the challenges. Somalia has to rebuild security, foster transparency and accountability, deal with a crippling drought, and avert famine. But I saw an opportunity to build on the momentum of the electoral process and to achieve lasting stability. We have a firm platform to improve security, deepen federalism, resolve residual conflicts, and advance reconciliation, and then complete the review of the Constitution. The drought is the most pressing priority. This morning, we presented a revised humanitarian response plan seeking an additional $900 million through the end of the year. And we also need to address the damage caused by climate change and conflict. Indeed, fighting continues to devastate Somalia. Violations of human rights and international humanitarian law occur with impunity. We are still seeing Al-Shabaab recruiting and exploiting children, and also children that are arbitrarily detained. And I'm particularly concerned about widespread sexual violence. Internally displaced women and girls and members of minority clans remain the most vulnerable. They need human rights urgent protection. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the historic agreement among Somali political leaders laid the foundation for Somalia's national security architecture. We must better support the Security Pact and the Somali security institutions. And again, we need to make sure that we are able to be coordinated in supporting the Somali government to build up the Somali National Army and the Somali police. What we have had until now are different efforts by different countries doing different training programs in different areas of the country that do not match and do not create the conditions for a unified national army and a unified police force. It's time to overcome this lack of coordination. It's time to have one single program of training of Somali soldiers and of Somali police, and that single program of training to be led by the Somali institutions, and the UN will be totally committed to support that way of doing business. And I welcome Somalia's first national development plan in 35 years. I also commend the government for its commitment to progressively create and strengthen the institutions of a true state. I hope that we will soon be able to see a country able to collect its taxes, to have its own police and security forces, to provide basic public services and guarantee the security of its citizens through its own police force and army. We all must support the realization of this vision, and I see progressively in the future AMISOM being able to reduce its role after an initial necessary surge, and national institutions to be fully able to function. And I urge partners to align their support to the plan and to help Somalia achieve economic progress, generate revenue, reduce over-reliance on donor resources, and create conditions for debt relief. And I think debt relief is not only an essential economic and financial question, is also a moral question. The present generation of Somali, the Somali children we see in dramatic circumstances, are burdened by a debt that has decades and that was contracted in completely different circumstances by completely different actors. Now, I know that there is a number of technical issues that need to be properly addressed. I know that debt relief needs to be sustainable, but I think we also need a strong political commitment to make it really happen and to create the conditions for development to be much more strongly supported by the international community. And this conference aims to agree on a new partnership as Somalia turns a page. The United Nations will do everything possible to make this the start of a new chapter of sustainable prosperity and lasting peace for Somalia, to the benefit of us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, for those powerful remarks and for your insight and for the continued support of the United Nations at this important moment in Somalia's future. And as we look to that future, I think it's worth perhaps just taking a moment to remember how far we've come. Just 5 years ago, Al-Shabaab controlled large parts of Somalia. Piracy was costing global trade $7 billion a year, and the country was recovering from a famine the previous year, which had killed 250,000 people, half of whom were under 5 years old. But today, Al-Shabaab has been driven back across Somalia, such that they no longer pose an existential threat to the country. International efforts to tackle piracy have helped to ensure that until March this year, there had been no attacks at sea for 5 years. And whilst the London conferences in 2012 and 2013 brought new momentum to the political process, supporting the work of the nascent federal government, none of this could have been achieved without the vital contributions of a broad international coalition, especially the African Union and its members. I know that Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Burundi and Djibouti have taken heavy casualties in the fight against Al-Shabaab, as indeed have Somali security forces. But your commitment to the AMISOM mission has been fundamental to the progress that has been made. So too has the enormous contributions of countries like Turkey and the UAE, America and the European Union. Yet despite this progress, deep challenges remain. Al-Shabaab has tripled its attacks on Mogadishu, and Somali forces do not yet have the capability to take over control of their own security. The political process still has a way to go, with Somalia once again ranked the most fragile state in the world. While the drought has left more than 6 million people in need of humanitarian assistance and almost 1 million children acutely malnourished, with 2 million refugees living in camps in neighbouring countries and more than 1 million displaced people within Somalia. Of course, we must continue to respond urgently to the need for humanitarian assistance. I'm proud that the United Kingdom is at the forefront of these efforts, providing £110 million over 2 years for emergency food assistance, life-saving nutrition, safe drinking water and emergency health care. Other donors have stepped up, and I welcome generous contributions from Sweden, Norway, Japan and Germany, as well as the important work of the UN in coordinating international efforts. But more is needed so that everything possible can be done to help those in the hardest to reach areas. So we will look closely at needs of the revised UN appeal, and we urge others to continue to step up in the months ahead. But if we are to support President Farmajo in building a better long-term future for his country, we must do more than tackle the consequences of this crisis, as vital as it is. We must also address its causes by building Somalia's resilience and helping to develop the security and stability that can provide the best hope of preventing similar crises in the future. This means first and foremost agreeing a detailed security plan that will help Somalia to develop rapidly the structures, forces, resources and leadership needed to take control of its own security and to push on with the fight against Al-Shabaab and other extremists. And second, it means backing President Farmajo in his efforts to build a more inclusive, federal and democratic state, together with the economic development that can create more jobs and livelihoods for Somalia's people. Let me briefly take each of these points in turn. First, Somali-led security is the essential foundation for political and economic progress. We know that AMISOM are overstretched and that troop-contributing countries simply cannot be expected to carry the burden of Somalia's security forever. So Somalia's forces need to be built up rapidly through a federated model that also brings in regional forces. The security pact that we are proposing at this conference will build on the historic agreement between the federal government of Somalia and the federal member states over the size, location, financing, command and control of the future Somali army and police. It will improve the coordination of international efforts, including the UK's commitment to train Somali forces in Baidoa, the UAE's development of a state-of-the-art training facility, America's training and equipping of Danab Special Forces, and Turkey's work to train Somali officers and NCOs. And it will make sure that when there are future offensives, there are also the resources and plans to get services and supplies through to areas that have been retaken from al-Shabaab control. As part of this pact, we want to see more detailed plans for Somali security reform so that Somalia can take responsibility for its own security and enable the drawdown of AMISOM troops as conditions on the ground allow. We want to see the integration of Somali regional forces and an increase in Somali capacity, as this will be crucial in allowing the resumption of offensives against the remaining al-Shabaab strongholds in southern Somalia, as well as the continued pressure on the small Daesh affiliate in Puntland and improve security in Mogadishu. And we want to see al-Shabaab degraded as Somali security forces gradually replace AMISOM across Somalia. To support this, the UK will provide an additional £21 million over the next 2 years to bolster our existing efforts to provide training and mentoring to the Somali National Army and support wider capacity building for Somali institutions. And I strongly encourage others here today to make their own commitments to support this process and to do so at the latest by the time of the next security conference in October. Second, we are proposing today a new partnership for Somalia, through which President Farmajo will commit to the development of an inclusive and federal democratic state, and the international community will back him with better targeted support for the jobs and livelihoods that can drive economic recovery. So through this new partnership, Somalia will commit to a 4-year roadmap of reforms that include closer cooperation between Mogadishu and the regions of Somalia on security and stabilisation, and a political agreement on resource and power sharing that can lead to a revised federal constitution. Somalia will also work towards a fairer and more accessible justice system. It will prioritise the tackling of corruption and set a clear path to one person, one vote elections in 2021. In return, the international community will back these reforms with better targeted support for economic recovery. This will include the targeting of donor support on key investment priorities, such as the agriculture, livestock and fisheries sectors, and support for mobilising development finance and working towards securing debt relief. We know just how challenging President Farmajo's reforms will be to deliver, but we know too just how vital they are. They will enable Somalis to know who is responsible for their security and their access to justice. They will give Somali people the chance to ensure that their resources are managed equitably and transparently. And they will give the federal government a greater ability to raise the vital domestic revenues that can underpin economic recovery, funding public services in areas liberated from al-Shabaab, and paying for the professional armed forces and police that are so important to Somalia's security. And by creating more business and employment opportunities, these reforms will also mean that more of Somalia's brightest and best people will be able to stay in Somalia or return to Somalia to play their part in building a new future for their country. The challenges we're talking about today are great, but so too is the opportunity before us. There is much work to do, and today is only a stepping stone on the road to the better future for Somalia that we all want to see. But as we have shown in recent years, Somalia is a place where the world can unite. And if we continue to do so, if we seize this moment to come together behind the efforts of President Farmajo, if we work together to deliver this new security pact and support the whole of Somalia, there can be a new future for this country. In what was once called the world's most dangerous place, we can defeat the terrorists, keep them out, and bring Somalia the stability and prosperity it deserves. So thank you once again for your support today. I'm delighted that the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, will be acting as the UK host for today's conference. And I look forward to hearing the details of your discussions and to working with you all in the months and years ahead, as together we support President Farmajo in building a better future for all the people of Somalia. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for joining us. We will now show on the screens a short film about the progress made in Somalia since this group first gathered in 2012.
Thank you very much, everybody. Excellencies, distinguished guests, some of you may know, we are in the middle of a general election campaign in this country, about which, of course, the rules of Purdah mean that I am forbidden from saying anything, or certainly not saying anything of any interest. But the Prime Minister has had to leave to get on with that important work, as you can imagine, and she's asked me to continue chairing this session. But before we get on, can I just respectfully point out to our immensely distinguished colleagues that we have a lot to get through. So I must ask guests, if possible, to respect the time limit on their interventions. And noting the status of many of our colleagues, can I also say that we take all protocol henceforward as observed. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to invite His Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, to make a further keynote speech in this opening session. Mr. Faki, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Je regrette.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry to speak while Theresa May is left, but nonetheless. Mohammed Abdullah Mohammed, the President of the Republic of Somalia and Federal Republic of Somalia, heads of delegation,
United Nations Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen. May I first of all thank most sincerely the Honorable Prime Minister and Her Majesty's government for convening this third conference on Somalia at a defining moment in the history of Somalia. I would like, on behalf of the African Union and on my own behalf, to thank the government for inviting the African Union as the premier continental organization dealing with the problem of its member state. I see this opportunity to congratulate President Mohammed Abdullahi and his government on their continuous efforts to lay the foundations for sustainable peace, reconciliation, and reconstruction in Somalia. The African Union supports your government to ensure peace, reconstruction, and socio-economic development of Somalia. I pay tribute to the troop and police contributing countries, namely Burundi, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, and Zambia, and to the thousands of young African men and women who paid the ultimate price to restore peace and stability in Somalia out of African solidarity. I reassure you that under my leadership, the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, will continue to endeavor to reduce the threats posed by the terrorist Al-Shabaab and also apply the African Union's policy of zero tolerance to the violation of human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, if appropriate support is not provided to the government of Somalia and to the African Union mission in Somalia, the gains made will be reversed. Let me therefore highlight few areas that deserve our immediate attention. Somalis have the primary responsibility for maintaining peace and security in their country. We strongly urge all national stakeholders to continue to show leadership, resolve, and unity of purpose, without which no amount of external assistance will maintain the gains. Al-Shabaab has been degraded but not eliminated. Therefore, Somali and AMISOM forces will require urgent additional support in terms of predictable and sustainable funding, logistic, force enabler, and force multipliers. I welcome the signing of the Somali National Security Architecture. We believe that the AU has a central role to play, working with international partners in support of the effective implementation of this national security architecture. We have set 2018 as a commencement of the drawdown of AMISOM, whose exit strategy must be based on clear criteria. We should strive to establish the necessary conditions to enable AMISOM exit. AMISOM remains the least resort mission. AMISOM forces have literally conducted operations with their bare hands. We must recognize that we are all collectively working towards a Somali takeover of responsibilities, rather than an AMISOM exit. In this regard, I commend the partnership between the AU and the UN on Somalia. In line with the letter and spirit of the joint United Nations African Union framework on enhanced partnership in peace and security, which I signed with the Secretary General Guterres in New York in 19 April. Similarly, the European Union has remained one of the most consistent support to AMISOM and the AU, and we appreciate its remarkable and dedicated support. We also commend the UK and the USA for their assistance to Somalia. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the humanitarian situation in Somalia remains at utmost concern. Despite positive response by the international community to the appeals made by Secretary General Guterres and myself, the contribution so far is still not yet commensurate with current needs of the requirements of the affected population. Lastly, we all agree in the previous London conferences that there was need for coordination of our efforts in Somalia, which is not yet the case. It is our hope that the agreement reached in this conference on modalities for coordination and harmonization will bear the expected result. I am glad to announce that a Somalia African Union Joint Task Force has been established, through which all efforts, including the humanitarian assistance, will be channeled. This conference is an opportunity to reaffirm our resolve and support to the effort of the federal government of Somalia to defeat Al-Shabaab and thereby terrorism. The task will not be easy, but the way to the new horizon is now paved. I am also happy to offer that AU hosts the next conference in Somalia in Addis Ababa. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I now call upon His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda.
Excellencies, heads of state and government, distinguished heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen, Uganda was the pioneer troop contributing country with the leading elements of our first contingent landing in Mogadishu on the 6th of March 2007. Many observers were convinced that our effort was hopeless, if not suicidal. We were, however, confident of the correctness and feasibility of our decision. This was due to our knowledge of the African peoples, those people that have inhabited this area for the last 4 million years. Many of the African societies live symbiotically with one another, utilizing their diversity for mutual benefit. Bigotry, which seems to characterize some societies in the world, is not common in the African societies. I normally tell my Muslim friends that according to my culture, my list of haram, the hagaru, is much longer than theirs. It is not only pigs that we regard as haram. Our list of haram includes fish, which we regard as snake, chicken, because it is flying and we think if you eat it, it will be unstable, mutton, etc. Nevertheless, we used to rear chicken for use in divination in the traditional religions. Moreover, our people would happily donate chicken to our neighboring communities who relish the consuming of those creatures. The same applied to fish, mutton, etc. In other words, our philosophy was live and let live. Enjoy your rights, but do not interfere with the rights of others. Our communities specialize in skills and products and exchange goods and services. That is how we were able to build a strong civilization that withstood the assaults we suffered from slave trade, from colonialism, and from the local tyranny of our myopic and egocentric chiefs. Therefore, when we heard of the bankrupt ideology of bigotry being pushed by groups from Asia and the Middle East, being imposed on the people of Somalia, we had to send a clear message to them, and Somalia was one of the rendezvous points between the two diametrically opposed world outlooks: live and let live, or chauvinism. Since that time, the following have been achieved. Number one, the troop contributing countries have increased to 5. These are Uganda, Burundi, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. 2, the Somali government moved from exile in Kenya, where it had been based, to Mogadishu since 2007. 3, the international organizations also relocated to Mogadishu from Nairobi, Kenya. 4, many Al-Shabaab-dominated areas have been liberated. The Ugandan contingent alone stretches from Mogadishu to the seaport of Barawe. That is about 250 kilometers in length. This is not talk of the areas liberated by the brother contingents from Ethiopia, Kenya, Burundi, and Djibouti. 5, there are many noticeable reconstruction activities in many parts of Somalia, especially in Mogadishu, in the form of private buildings, roads, a modern airport, etc. 6, businesses are thriving in Mogadishu. 7, indirect elections have taken place a number of times since 2000. The most recent election was the one of the President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed Farmajo and the new parliament. 8, the menace of piracy at sea has been tamed. However, our strongly held view is that it is not enough to check Al-Shabaab. Somalia must heal completely and stand on its own feet. In our view, there are a number of bottlenecks that stop the complete healing of Somalia. Number one, the absence of patriotic pan-Somali political parties. There may be individuals who have got a pan-Somalia outlook. These individuals, however, need to form political parties with a patriotic national outlook away from the bankrupt ideology of clanism being pushed by opportunists. The recent election of the president by an overwhelming consensus seems to be a healthy seed for the future. This patriotic idea, however, needs to be translated into political organizations. Two, the same patriotic ideas must then be infused in the Somali National Army, recruited on a quota basis from all the parts of the country. Three, this army needs officers, needs NCOs, needs specialists in addition to the ordinary soldiers. Four, the multiplicity of trainers from different countries of the Somali army needs to be coordinated by the Somali command around a Somali forces military doctrine so that it becomes a cohesive force with a clear historical mission. Five, the Somalis need to resolve the issue of whether they will rebuild the Somali army by pay or by patriotism. If it is to be by pay, who will pay them? Who will pay these soldiers? Is the Somali state able to pay a large army on that big territory of 637,000 square kilometers it needs so as to pacify the whole country? The present partial pacification of the country is not good enough. Can the international community agree to pay a large Somali army for some years so that the wholly liberated Somali territory can be used to generate revenues to pay the public servants and also cope with other obligations? Six, the Somali army and the soldiers from the troop contributing countries could be further equipped to do more road projects in the areas of their responsibility, along with the local authorities, so that the country is opened up. They can also build schools and health centers for the benefit of the people. The liberation has to resonate with the people in the countryside. Seven, in the meantime, the troop contributing countries should be supported sufficiently, their small numbers notwithstanding, to use force multipliers, gunships, attack planes, airlift means, to further weaken Al-Shabaab in their remote hideouts. Our concept of counterinsurgency is to have mobile forces to hit the enemy and then the zonal forces to ensure that the enemy does not reinfest the areas that are liberated. It should be the Somali army to provide these zonal forces. If they cannot do it yet, what should we do? That is why we propose long jump operations to eliminate them by surprise attacks. It is better than giving them extended holidays without any punishment for their mistakes and allowing them to create liberated areas by default. Eight, there are the short-term issues of the drought and other short-term issues of relief, some minimum rehabilitation, and so on. We need to provide relief so that the long-suffering people of Somalia do not die from this additional problem. 9, apart from the drought, however, the international community could harness the power of the Somali business class. Do the Somali businessmen supply the massive relief items that are delivered to Somalia? Or is it the foreign businesses that supply these items? Our view is that the harnessing the power of the Somali business class would not only be good for the economy of the country, but would also be good for the politics of the country. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, very much for his contribution, and I call on His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the the Prime Minister for convening this London Somali conference. This signifies the commitment of all of us here to support the people of Somalia in their protracted quest to realize their dream of a peaceful and prosperous country. 4 years ago, at another London conference on Somalia, we made a number of commitments, including to inject new momentum into the political process, to strengthen AMISOM, and help Somalia develop its own security forces, to help build stability at local level, and to step up action to tackle piracy and terrorism. We also agreed to help the transitional federal government of Somalia to improve on public financial management and enhance the capacity of the justice system. Today, we can say that the situation in Somalia has improved significantly. A new Somalia has emerged to assume its rightful place amongst the community of nations. In spite of many challenges that the country still faces, remarkable positive developments have been witnessed in almost every sector, putting the country on course for steady social, economic, and political transformation. The successful conclusion of the 2016-17 electoral process that led to the election of President Abdullahi Mohammed and the peaceful transition has set Somalia on a path towards improved governance and political stability. As a neighbor, a long-term friend and partner to Somalia, my government has resolved to do whatever it can to help Somalia to remain on this positive trajectory. Indeed, it was my pleasure to host President Mohammed during his state visit to Kenya soon after his election, where we discussed and committed to working closely on a wide range of issues, including capacity building and border management. Notwithstanding the significant progress registered in various fronts, Somalia urgently needs enhanced support from the international community in order to meet its goal of securing peace and prosperity. And in this context, we call upon the international community to fully support the implementation of the Somali security architecture, including the African Union mission, AMISOM. Although AMISOM has made significant progress in degrading terrorist activities and stabilizing Somalia, there is still much to do before a planned AMISOM drawdown and transition to Somali security forces. I therefore call on this conference to endorse the call by the troop-contributing countries and the African Union for urgent measures to support and strengthen AMISOM, particularly in the following priority areas. First, the upsurge of AMISOM by another additional 4,000 troops to liberate areas still under the control of terrorists. Second, to facilitate the deployment of critical enablers and force multipliers, as well as the provision of predictable and sustainable funding, including from the United Nations assessed contributions. And to that end, I thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your comments on this particular matter. Third, the provision of United Nations support to the Somali security forces in order to accelerate the AMISOM exit strategy. Fourth, support the implementation of the Somali National Development Plan to enable the people of Somalia, including refugees, to go back home and participate in the reconstruction of their country. Fifth, call on the conference to endorse and support the Nairobi Declaration and Plan of Action as agreed at a special summit of IGAD heads of state and government in March of this year. I am glad to note that this conference will in addition consider the issue of humanitarian assistance following prolonged drought that has affected the entire Horn of Africa region. I hope this meeting will agree on a joint plan for the urgent extension of the necessary humanitarian support in order to alleviate further suffering of the affected communities. In closing, the government and the people of Kenya shall remain a faithful partner to the people of Somalia as we have been over the years. We will continue to work closely with the federal government, the regions, and the international community in the quest to secure peace and prosperity for Somalia and for this and other and many generations to come. I thank you.
Thank you. I thank the President of the Republic of Kenya very much for his contribution, and I call on His Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia.
Your Excellency, let me begin by commending the co-chairs for organizing this unique conference. Today, I'd like to make 4 points that I think are vital, important to ensure lasting peace and sustainable development in Somalia. Number one, as you all know, our region in general and Somalia in particular has been consistently targeted by terrorist attacks, mainly from Al-Shabaab. The fight against Al-Shabaab has been progressing. Successful offensives by the Somali National Army, AMISOM, and friendly forces have driven Al-Shabaab out of many towns and villages. Al-Shabaab's popular support is waning. Its income levels are reduced significantly. Its ability to command and control of its forces is not to a level it has been a few years back. The extremist group is on the retreat, but it still has not been eliminated, remains dangerous with the capacity to launch terrorist attacks both in Somalia and outside. We must therefore take practical measures to further intensify and better coordinate AMISOM and friendly forces along with the Somali National Army against fighting Al-Shabaab. At this moment, our contingent in AMISOM in Hiran region is fiercely fighting with Al-Shabaab in Halgen, just at this moment. So you can see how much the AMISOM force is working very hard to eliminate this menace. We also need to develop a well-functional Somali National Army that can effectively deal with Al-Shabaab and progressively take over from AMISOM. In the coming few years, maybe in the coming 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, we have to make it as functional as possible. The international community should continue giving political, financial, and logistical support to AMISOM and Somalia's national security architecture to help stabilize Somalia. We in the region would continue to shed our blood, pay immense sacrifice, and do whatever is just and necessary to restore the long sought after peace and tranquility in Somalia and across the region. There is no greater contribution, no greater solidarity than this. We further need to recognize the partial lifting of UN arms embargo on Somalia as an important step forward towards creating the necessary conditions for further lifting of the embargo, as the President of Somalia has just expressed. Number two, I would like to commend the federal government of Somalia and the federal member states for the recent landmark agreement reached between them towards a genuine, inclusive political consultation in an attempt to form a stable, peaceful, and democratic political process in the country. This agreement, I hope, would pave the way for the integration of federal and regional forces into a coherent national security architecture capable of gradually taking on lead responsibility for providing security with a view to defeating Al-Shabaab and rebuilding the country. An inclusive process adhering to and abiding by the country's constitutional division of power is critically important. Number three, I want to draw your attention to the fact that the entire IGAD region has been affected by the current drought and migration situations with serious political and security implications. The number of refugees from conflict and drought-affected countries in the region crossing into neighboring countries will continue to rise unless an intensified response mechanism has been put in place. The outbreak of the cholera epidemic in Somalia with spillover effects is a cause for concern as well. In this regard, the situation in Somalia calls even for more close follow-up and intervention. Number 4, equally supporting Somalia's economic recovery that offers Somalis livelihood and jobs for this enterprising community and generates domestic revenue will be essential to Somalia's enduring stability and sustainable development. The government in Somalia, federal and state alike, has to demonstrate to its people that it is delivering. They should be at the front seat steering this process. In conclusion, I would like to remind the conference that Somalia will continue to need substantial support from the regional and international community. Let us empower the federal government of Somalia to be at the center of all these endeavors. Let us speak with one voice, with new partnership spirit. Let us be leather-beam focused, follow one channel of intervention for regional and international collaborative action. This, I believe, is the only viable option. Otherwise, we can be sure that the progress will be so sluggish. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency very much for his contribution, and indeed I thank everyone very much for their contributions. That brings us to the end of the opening session of the London Somalia Conference. I think people have set out a vision for Somalia that is optimistic but also realistic about the challenges ahead in building a peaceful and prosperous Somalia.